Hello everyone, Marcus still here. I just wanted to do a quick little video going over some of the recent things that were said. Well, I say recent, but it's been a few weeks now, in regards to NVIDIA's announcement of their NVIDIA GTX 1080 graphics cards, as well as the Pascal series of graphics. But in addition, I'm going to be going over some of the requirements that you need to run virtual reality at this point in time, and some of my thoughts on what that's going to mean going forward with the recent announcements by NVIDIA and what should hopefully be matched up, if not surpassed, by AMD as well. So let's just get this started. So yeah, around May 6th of this month, NVIDIA held a press conference in order to unveil their newest series of graphics card, the Pascal line. In it, they announced the NVIDIA GTX 1080 and the NVIDIA GTX 1070. Those are going to be their two primary graphics cards for the high end and mid end, I suppose. Depends on how high you define high end. But yeah, they announced those graphics cards as well as some new features for the NVIDIA development programs, including NVIDIA Ansel, which is a screenshot program that allows game developers to implement the opportunity for players to take extremely high resolution screenshots of the video games that they're playing. You'll be able to get incredible amounts of detail, ranging from taking photos in HDR, having 360-degree photos, virtual reality photos, at resolutions up to 61 440 to 34 560. Rokuman sen yo byaku yonju or something like that. Yeah, that's a really big number. But yeah, it's a extremely high resolution images. That should be pretty nice if you want to get some new backgrounds or something awesome. Kind of wondering if you'll be able to create new virtual desktop backgrounds with that. Oh, and it just changed backgrounds on me. Give me a second, everyone. Change background. Starfield. Okay. Reset orientation. Reset orientation. And it's not responding. But yeah, guys, that's some pretty high resolution screenshots right there, and it should let me get some pretty cool things going on back here. Let me see if I can actually change it up a little bit higher. It's a bit uncomfortable right now for me. There we go. But yeah, so there's that. And this is a feature over here that actually got me pretty excited. The ability to correct distortions in images with multiple displays. I'll go into this a little bit later, but more or less here you can see what happens when you try to run a multi-monitor setup like I have right here. Here you can see two displays in VR, but they're kind of curved around in order to get a better grasp on it. I could have the images go flat here. Let me see. I'll try to change it up here in the settings. Settings, and I'm going to turn it off from curved, and you're going to see that it's going to get flat all of a sudden and doesn't let me do multiple monitors. But let me increase the size now. And as you can see, it takes up the majority of my FOV now. But as I go further to the sides, it gets a little bit uncomfortable to have to turn my head side to side just to see the full scope of the image. So it's much more comfortable to have it curve around. Let me reduce the screen size now. There we go. It's much more comfortable to have the image just curve around you. It's not really easy to do that with flat monitors, so what you do is you just kind of angle them towards yourself. And this is all well and good, except for the fact that it creates a bit of a distortion. The image is expecting to be a flat plane, but you're curving it now. When you curve things towards or away from you, that tends to create this little thing called perspective effects. This is what allows us to have 3D vision, but at the same time, it also kind of makes things look messed up at the corners of our vision or distorted. So here you can see the image wants to go through here, and it should, if this were a natural window, just follow through along that line. But because you've curved the monitor, it decided to go downwards now, and it creates a sense of perspective. That does not look good while you're playing a video game, and really it kind of makes things on this side of the monitor after a certain point kind of worthless. It's good to create a bit of a sense of immersion in terms of just having the image surrounding you, but for actual accuracy it's not all that useful. So instead, here they've corrected everything. Now the image properly lines up right over here. So as you can see, even though this monitor is curving outwards, perspective, as you can see, it kind of would go towards and converge at some point somewhere around this area or something. But even though that's happening, the image has been corrected, so it just follows through naturally, essentially turning the three monitors into one gigantic display. I'll go into this a little bit more again later. I've just went over it quite a bit now. But yeah, that was some pretty impressive stuff. Other than that, they did announce some virtual reality features. Let me see if I can find the pages here. Yeah, here's the NVIDIA Ansel page talking about the kind of tools that we currently have, like print screening your image or just taking a regular picture, stuff like DVR captures or video capture using a capture card and stuff like that. But with Ansel, you'll be able to freely move the camera around inside of the game and take incredible pictures, do post-processing effect. Some people are very taking to calling this the VR or the video game Instagram in certain aspects, and the insane resolutions. EXPR capture. I'm actually not too sure what this is. Actually, it's just a different format, I suppose. 360-degree photos. Pretty cool stuff. Coming to some games, though, it's going to have to be implemented on a feature level basis. Then they have some more VR work-centric stuff. This includes lens match shading. I'll go into this a lot more later because it's pretty complicated. Single pass stereo. This is something that lets the GPU handle rendering for both eyes and virtual reality in one single execution instead of having to do multiple ones. And we also have physics for VR, VR Artworks Audio. I'll actually talk about this one quite a bit little later because it's going to be pretty cool. And yeah, this was going over the lens matched shading. I have the video over here. We'll have a look at that a little bit later. But yeah, more or less, they announced a bunch of virtual reality centric features, as well as their newest graphics cards line, and getting some API support inside of Unity and Unreal Engine, physics, VRWorks Audio again. Let's just say they announced quite a bit of GPU centric stuff. But so yeah, that more or less does it for what they announced, but what does this mean for us in VR admirer land or users of VR? Well, there's quite a lot of implications here, actually. Let's just get started with the whole VR photos things real quick, just because we were already discussing it quite a bit. Right now, it's kind of tricky to get a good shot of things in virtual reality and video games. I mean, a lot of the times we manage to use print screens or capture devices in order to get a good grasp of the image, but it's really hard to really replicate or get really cool angles on different things. So this is going to be an incredible tool for machinima, but for virtual reality, it has a lot of different uses since you might theoretically be able to take screenshots and use that as a new method of letting people know what they're going to be experiencing within virtual reality without having to have the game given to them. Right now, there's a pretty big dearth of ways to really experience or communicate virtual reality experiences to those who don't have virtual reality headsets. And even if you do have a virtual reality headset, right now, if I want to try out a Oculus game or wonder how it looks, the only options I have are a couple of screenshots or videos. That's not a really good way to represent what it's going to feel like to play these things in virtual reality. And if a developer doesn't really take the time to create a demo, a beta, or something else, you're pretty much out on the limb and gonna have to buy the game before you try it, or just find somebody who has the game already. But at some point in the pipeline, a customer has to part way with their money blind without knowing what they're getting into. And that's not a good sign for consumers overall. So having the ability to take screenshots in this manner is going to be really useful. Right now, the image that you're seeing here outside of my monitors, this is a 360-degree photo provided by default by the Virtual Desktop app. There are many different backgrounds you can use, ranging from actual 3D images that can be pretty engaging. Here, let's switch to a different background here. A 3D one, like the sunrise. This is actually, as you can see, the background just changed right now. It's pretty pretty and all that. Nice lush grass here on the ground, rocks, the trees. And the one thing that I can't really communicate to you guys right here is that it's in 3D. I can sense the depth on some of these things. The grass feels like I could just reach out and grab it to a certain extent. It goes far beyond what a regular 2D image can do, and Ansel enables us to take these kinds of screenshots. Aside from the fact that I'd absolutely love to just be able to take VR screenshots of all the games I play and make those the backgrounds I play in or I use V-Desktop in. Good God, that would have saved me so much work for certain things. But anyhow, it'd be a pretty awesome feature for just VR backgrounds in general. It's going to be a pretty good way to experience your content, and it's a good way to preview things too. I don't know if they mentioned if you could do a video with something like this, so I think that'd be a bit tougher to do, but it would certainly go a long way towards giving people a way to preview things in virtual reality without having to just put their wallet on the line or expect a demo to be produced. But yeah, that more or less does it for my thoughts on Ansel. A lot of people have been making a pretty big deal out of it. Truth be told, I mean, it's not my thing, and I do have uses for it, but it's not the biggest things that really caught my attention. Let's go a little bit forward here with VRWorks Audio. This is pretty cool, actually. I think it's been relatively understated, actually, with regards to virtual reality discussions lately, how important audio and other sensories immersion can be with all the hullabaloo over visuals and resolutions and the HMDs themselves. But a good audio solution can go a very far way towards improving your sense of immersion within virtual reality. I find that when a game has poor audio, I don't really feel quite as immersed because I can notice the ways in which the visions and things I'm seeing aren't matching up with the audio that I'm hearing. And the thing is, audio emulation in games has more or less remained somewhat stagnant for a while, mostly because no one's really asked for a lot better. We've had surround sound set up, 7.1, 5.1. We're starting to see some VR binaural audio to a certain extent, but it's getting tricky to really get some fine-tuned audio simulation. Since the thing is, sound is a wave just like light, and it can bounce around. It can do different things within its environment that makes it kind of tricky to actually properly render it accurately if we want to save on processing power. Here you can see that there's a sound source. I'm going to look a little bit closer so you guys can get a better look, but there's a sound source right here, and it's releasing its sound, and here's the person that's going to be listening to it. That sound has to do a lot of different things, from traveling here to bouncing off of there, going straight towards them. Sound can travel in a lot of different ways. If the sound source were to be right here, for example, the sound would have to be a lot quieter, slightly muffled, because there's an obstruction between it and the user. It would sound louder from this point, since it gets to bounce right here and then go there, and might sound a little bit quieter because it has to go through far more bounces to get here. The problem with that is that it's effectively requesting ray tracing for sound, and as you all know, ray tracing and global illumination for visuals itself is a hard enough feat, so sound can be pretty tricky too. So it's impressive that NVIDIA is already working on getting VR audio set up so that we can have very immersive sound to go along with the immersive visuals that we're getting to further improve the sense of immersion we can get out of things. Okay, and let's get around back to this thing too, the multiple lens sampling. I'm gonna have a look at the video here. Since it goes into things pretty well, I'm gonna skip around since I don't want to just be a reaction video right here. But yeah, I'm gonna turn off the audio here. As you can see, this is more or less going into projection technologies and the way that we generate images in computer graphics. Here, they're showing the way that you can alter the viewports to properly display what's going on these images. Same thing as I was mentioning here. Sometimes the image should look like this. Now, currently, it looks like this. It gets distorted at the edges, makes things look pretty ugly, and more or less unusable on this side, mostly just an extra. Here, it becomes a window, and truth be told, it almost becomes a form of virtual reality in and of itself, guys. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, it's pretty sweet there, the switch that they're making. The big thing that's got me like hyped up with this is they move ahead a little bit to the more virtual reality centric parts here. They switch to, yeah, here you go. Here you can see the two viewports being rendered. They have lenses right there simulating the distortion that's going to go on. And let's move the head a little bit. They're going to show. Okay, this is the image you saw before right here. That's the way the image should be rendered technically, or what the image is supposed to be rendering based on the two viewport system that it currently has. The problem comes in once we add the VR lenses that we're using in order to have it so we can focus on the screens that are being attached like right in front of our faces. You can see right there that there's already a bit of distortion going on thanks to the two lenses. It's pin cushioning things, it's tightening them up, it makes things look a little bit pinched. It makes, there's another illustration here, but more or less the overall idea is the lenses require distortion, and the graphics are accounting for that distortion, and it changes the image and it alters the way we have to see things. What's nice about multi-res shading, or the lens projection, I don't know, but let's just say that they're doing something interesting here, or whatever it's called. But yeah, it alters the way that the viewport is generated to begin with in order to better take advantage of the processing power that we have. I'm going to switch over here to another image, or another illustration they have. I believe Road2VR has it. Here we go. Here is what's currently going on in virtual reality. There's the first image that is rendered. That's what it looks like in a standard projection. But then, in order to fit virtual reality, it gets compressed and stretched out and altered. And in the process of that, you see that we've just lost a whole bunch of pixels right there. That's a lot of wasteful processing power, and it isn't really all that good for the best efficiency. So what do we do now? With the new technique, let me see if I can find the name here, lens matched shading. Yeah, with lens matched shading and simultaneous multi-projection, we're now enabled to do something different. I believe the president of, or the CEO of NVIDIA, he was speaking about this. We can have up to 16 different projections, but the way this is relevant is that it changes the way that we render the VR image. Now you see that they've altered the distortion system, the render initially from the start. Instead of rendering the whole square, it just renders there's four small projections into a different pattern, and then you distort that. That requires considerably less processing power, since you've switched from rendering all those extra black pixels to just rendering these, and now you distort it. There's still a small amount of waste, but it's nowhere near as bad as the amount of waste going on here, where you rendered all that and now you're only using this small little bit. Well, now you render this bit and you go to this bit. I don't recall the exact number, but it can be a significant boost, and there you go. NVIDIA says it can give you up to a 50% boost, which, going by the processing demands of virtual reality, is pretty important. Okay, so that just about does it for most of the VR stuff. There is one central thing that I want to get to in terms of the processing power demands of virtual reality right now that I think you guys are going to find pretty interesting. Here are some reviews of the NVIDIA GTX 1080 that have been released. We still don't have the reviews of the 1070, but let's just have a quick look at the kind of processing differences that we can see right now. Here's the 1080 and the 1080 overclocked. A lot of the overclocks at around 2000 megahertz, which is around 2 gigahertz, so pretty impressive stuff. But here you can see the current 980 and versus the 1080. That's a difference of 122 to 75. Let me see if my math is any good, but I believe that's 42 frames. That's almost over half of the resolution here, a 50% boost in performance right there. SLI might be able to surpass that right now, but it is a pretty major jump in terms of power.
Current time is 12:22 a.m.
I see. Sorry guys, virtual desktop just told me the time. But yeah, that's a pretty significant boost right there. Tomb Raider 1080p. Having a look at 1440p, yet again a big difference, 48 versus 87. 4K, 46 versus 27. We can just keep on going on and on about these, but there's a pretty big jump between the 980 to the 1080. It's not quite as big between the 7 from the 7 and some of the 7 from the Titan X to the 980 Ti, but it's still a significant boost throughout all these charts. Time will tell whether or not this has just been some driver manipulation or whether or not NVIDIA's messing around with the numbers at all. But let's just say the 1080 has become an enormous boost in terms of power as is compared to the last generation. NVIDIA may have puffed up the numbers or their statements a little bit, but it's still a pretty big deal. Why? Here's my thoughts. NVIDIA says that their 1070 or their 970 equivalent is going to be priced around $379 US and should have the power of the Titan X, which is a big boost over the 980, and which is a big boost over the 290. The 290 is more or less comparable to the current 970, which kind of makes me wonder if the 970 equivalent of the next generation, or the 1070, is going to be right here. Doesn't that mean that you're going to be able to get away with the 1060 as your virtual reality graphics card, or God forbid, the 1050 as your graphics card as a virtual reality. For anybody wondering what that means, it means that we're going to get a pretty significant drop in the price of building a virtual reality computer. Apart from the fact that gaming PCs as a whole are what you're going to need for virtual reality, right now it's a bit tough because virtual reality needs a very strong gaming PC. You need a 970 at the very minimum in order to be able to run most things. And guys, me having the 970, I can tell you right now, there are still some things that I struggle to run. Project Cars doesn't really feel like it's running at 90 frames per second most of the time, even when I drop all of the settings down to low. Trying to maintain performance in virtual desktop is all fine and good unless I start going crazy with a bunch of stuff. And then there's just the general problems with running more advanced looking games and requiring that they get dropped their settings just to handle the virtual reality demands. So the idea that we're going to be able to build a PC that's a lot cheaper but still gives us the same virtual reality we get now is very important. Just to give you an idea of what the exact specs we need are, Oculus has a page right here where they explain the kind of specs that they're expecting for virtual reality PCs. Right now, GTX 970 or AMD R9 290, i5 4590, 8 gigabytes of RAM, 1.3 video output, 3 USBs, the works. That's not exactly the most expensive. We're not asking for 2 Titan X's in SLI or 4 of them in XLI with a i7 5960X or something. But that's still a pretty meaty PC, right? When I tried to build it a little while ago, that was about $1,000 more or less to get a decent PC going. And if you going forward now with the kind of specs we might be expecting this year, here we have the Oculus VR Ready PCs line of products. These are PCs that Oculus believes are good enough to handle the demands of virtual reality, or at the very least the demands they set as the baseline for virtual reality. I've opened up both Asus's website and Alienware's websites for their VR Ready PCs, and one of the things you're going to notice they have in common is the CPU that they set right now is the i5-6400 Skylake processor by Intel. That processor is going for $179.99 or $180 right now on online. So that's a pretty chunky CPU right there, but that is somewhat affordable from a certain perspective. If we make everything else semi-budget, going with a HyperTooth 12 Evo, or even if you want to cut that off for a cooler, but let's just, you know what, I think that comes with a 6400. Let's just take that off real quick, guys. But yeah, there's no note on there. But yeah, this CPU combo that with a cheapo motherboard around $60, basic RAM, hard drive, a 960 HBM FBM mother case, 430 watt power supply, and Windows 10. The total cost of that is $660 and that's including the OS. That's a pretty big jump difference in pricing compared to the $1,000 I mentioned not too long ago. And do note, this is with a 960. The 1060 would be a similar price, but if it is as I expect it will be in another year or two, it could potentially be that the 1050 might be that just across the baseline to be somewhere within the virtual reality expected price range, at which point you can knock another 70 or just take off that $60 right there, and all of a sudden you have a $600 gaming PC that can handle virtual reality. Push that further, take off the Windows license, and you're basically looking at $500. That's within the range that I believe most gamers looking to build a virtual reality or even a regular gaming PC will be able to afford it. And that's more or less what we're hoping for, guys. Right now, one of the things I see being very prevalent in thoughts around virtual reality as to why we aren't seeing a huge amount of buzz is just, well, aside from the fact that Oculus and HTC have completely cacked the bed in terms of getting virtual reality properly out there. Come on, guys. We've got the headsets. You just have to give them to people. Come on, Sony, help us out right here. But yeah, technology-wise, things are getting cheaper. If AMD Zen, their upcoming CPU platform, can compete with Intel, because if you have a look here at the specs, they don't list an AMD processor. Because in Oculus's belief, AMD processors at this point in time just aren't good enough for virtual reality. And having had my 6300, I can almost agree with them. It's not a very good processor for virtual reality, and even with DX12 taking better advantage of CPU threading, we're gonna want AMD to provide us an equivalent or competing processor that can match up to the i5s at that lower price range and drive Intel to bring their processors down or improve things a lot better. I'm not too hopeful about Kaby Lake, their upcoming CPU architecture, being the one that ushers in for a quad-core i3. But if Cannon Lake's being 10 nanometer is enough, and AMD Zen providing enough competition, we might see the day where we can get a $130 or $100 processor that can match up to the current power of an i5 6400. And in other words, be ready for virtual reality, driving that price another bit lower, bringing the RAM prices steadily dropping, motherboard prices dropping, GPU prices dropping. Eventually, what I want to hear is the word that you can buy a virtual reality gaming setup for 500 bucks tops. And that's on the high end, and that's not counting the economies of scale for cheaper processors or pre-built manufacturers lowering prices. We want to reach the point where virtual reality is affordable for anyone who wants the gaming PC. You bought a gaming PC because you want to get good Minecraft footage, or you want to play the latest games at 1080p or 4K. Congratulations, you now have a VR PC and you didn't have to break the bank. And that's pretty important for virtual reality as it is, because even though you can handle virtual reality on mobile devices, because that's another thing I want to get into, guys, how can we say that we need such stupidly high power for PC VR when mobile VR is running on phones and is accomplishing incredible things of immersion and entertainment and value at a much lower price with much less power? But for the high end, at the very least, getting these prices down is pretty important. And in particular, for me personally, I want to start seeing better optimization of the power that we're having, because while having the 950 or the cheapest GPU you can get be good enough for virtual reality is going to be pretty impressive, the thing I think that virtual reality is missing out on right now is that we don't have enough just breakout, good God, sweet mercy, I need this right now virtual reality killer apps to get people motivated to wanting to buy a virtual reality headset. I mean, guys, seriously, if I told you right now Sword Art Online is coming out for the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, it's going to have the highest end graphics. You're going to need two 1080s or two 1080 Ti's to run this darn thing, but it'll be possible to buy it tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that while some of you might not be able to afford it right away, you would be going crazy over yourselves to try to save up the money you need to get that virtual reality headset. It would be the thing that drives the hype. And right now, we're kind of low on hype since there's not really all that much to play. I mean, let me see if I can open up my Oculus library here. I mean, right now I've got Virtual Desktop running, Lucky's Tale, that's been fun. Eve Valkyrie, Project Cars, Invasion, Showdown, Dream Deck. Yeah, Technolust, Chronos. These are all fun things, and they're plenty entertaining for me, but they're not killer apps. They're not the reason you're going to go out and buy an Oculus Rift now, are they? We're going to need more games, more software, and we need things that push the boundaries of what you can do with the hardware in order to really drive people to get to the platforms. Truth be told, guys, I was being overly optimistic in my belief in my expectations for where virtual reality would be. I've kind of driven my projections up a lot harder than they used to be, but more or less, I'm still optimistic that we need more power in order to generate something incredible, because we can. Right now, I feel like we're in the Atari-Apple II days of virtual reality. We aren't in the NES, PlayStation, N64 age, no. We'd be lucky to be there. We're still missing so many things, so many standards for virtual reality, and I just want to see these kind of technologies, all these changes, come in as fast as we can. As processors get cheaper, as graphics cards get cheaper and more powerful, as everything gets more powerful and cheaper, we're going to be able to see virtual reality really and properly flourish compared to where it is. This 1080 is a pretty big jump. I personally am still waiting for a 1080 Ti or something with HBM2 and a much bigger graphical or CPU or GPU power jump before I make my switch, because I personally want to see if I can make the VR RPG or something I do so stupidly, ridiculously excessive in terms of needing and processing power, but still incredible as a demonstration of power, that I think it'd be something worth it. Because right now, VR needs its killer app. We need that thing that makes people go, oh god, I need this right now. It can be expensive, we don't have to be able to buy it, and technically, depending on who you ask, we might already have it. I mean, some people are pretty happy with these Oculus Rifts, and the HTC Vive is having people going head over heels in regards to the experience, and forking out the money to set up forking up the extra $200 for the motion controls, and having to do all that setup, clearing out rooms, people selling their desks or sofas, because, like, I remember Jerry Holkins from Penny Arcade saying, the experience of the Oculus Rift and the Gear VR is pretty comfortable, but the HTC Vive is so awesome, and he kind of makes you ask, do we really need that living room couch? That's a pretty impressive endorsement right there, guys, but yeah, I think I'm just starting to ramble on now, guys, but yeah, I'm just kind of happy to see that the costs are going down for virtual reality and PCs as a whole. This rig right here isn't something I would entirely advise anybody to build, by the way, guys. I mean, there's so much, you should do so much better for yourself than just this. I remember I tried to building a PC like this my first time around, and I just felt so regretful about a lot of the choices. I wish I would have gone for an SSD because it's a lot faster. More RAM would be nice nowadays since games are starting to take advantage of 16 gigs. Getting a better motherboard gives you more expandability. Overclockable CPU gives you more comfort. Definitely get a CPU cooler, guys. Get a good CPU cooler. I regret choosing bad CPU coolers so much in my initial days. I remember recording a video I think it was a year or two ago where my CPU was fused to my heatsink and I wound up having to use dental floss to get it off. It was awful, but yeah, this is not a PC building video, but yeah, guys, what I'm trying to get to here is virtual reality is starting to become a little bit cheaper, little by little. This year should be a very good sign for anybody who's having a lookout or been waiting for that right time to get a GPU for virtual reality. I'd hold out until they announce the NVIDIA GTX 1060, or at the very least till see the reviews for the 1070, since NVIDIA could be entirely talking out of their ass in regards to its performance, since they did say that the 1080 was supposed to be about as good as 980s and SLI, which, looking at these numbers, 75 versus 41 is certainly possible since SLI scaling isn't perfect. It's not supposed to be like a doubling of the 1080s of the 780s power. Although they did, in one slide at one point, say that the VR performance for the 1080 should be around double that of the 1080 of the 980 Ti or the Titan X, which, using the projection technology we were just talking about here, single pass stereo rendering, and a bunch of other little features, it should theoretically be possible. I see where they're going for, but yeah, it's a pretty significant change that we've had here. I kind of wish I would have talked about this a little bit sooner, since by now most of you who are familiar with specs and all that kind of stuff have probably been deciding on whether or not you're going to get those PCs parts already. So yeah, kind of late to the party, guys. Sorry about that, but yeah, if you've been wondering about my thoughts on the matter, pretty good stuff. Hopefully AMD brings on the competition, since I want to see these big juggernauts fighting it out for our mighty dollars, and yeah, good stuff. Well, everyone, thank you very much for watching this highly rambly video. Yeah, this is a reminder of why I don't record most videos without a script. Tends to go on off on a tangent and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. This has been Markystal, logging out.